Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This video is for the standard best of 3 format, so if you're looking for best of 1, there's another video in the playlist. If you're looking for Historic, Explorer, playlist is where you want to be. I will try to get these out weekly in terms of looking at trends, in terms of the meta itself, looking at, what's the latest hotness, card changes in established decks, how people are adapting to the ever-evolving meta itself. And we're taking a statistical based approach. So we're getting data from UntapkedGG. For best of 3, we're also looking at recent MTGO league results, as well as big tournaments that take place to kind of give us a snapshot of what may differ between the arena ladder side of things and the tournament based side of things. The formats themselves, like I said, will vary between the videos themselves. So if you want to use Untapped, link is in the video description. I'll paste all these deck lists as always, timestamp them, we'll go from there. And we're really good there. I'm still recovering from losing my voice, so it is a little raspy. I apologize in advance. So we're going to start off with looking at popularity of decks, what you're going to see most often on the arena ladder for the last day, kind of a snapshot. Then we're going to look at the last week of September as folks are pushing into the top like 250 or 1200 Mythic. We're going to look at just Mythic rank this month with the focus on that. Seeing it's a good opportunity to kind of check because that's when people are, I tend to find, the most competitive. When you're doing that last push, you want to lock up that last slot. You want to get into the Mythic qualifier type thing. So kind of approaching it in that avenue and kind of going from there. So the big kind of factor that we've had in the last weeks to kind of influence this is the World Championship. It was the most recent, very high stakes tournament where pro players were playing. So a lot of these decks, when you're going to see me explain them, are going to be kind of correlated to either a team or a player themselves that brought it to the tournament. But let's dive in. So for the best, for the popularity of the day, it says May 30th now, but really we're just looking at today's date, so it doesn't really matter. This is October 2nd. This is going to be looking at 3 ranks, Platinum, Mythic, and Diamond. But then we're going to be focusing on the actual Mythic rank in terms of win percentages. So popularity of the day, we have 4-color control, which is the Atraxa piles, the Reduke piles, the Domain piles, 12% of the meta. It's pretty flat, all things considered. If we, from best of 1, for example, mono red was 24%. If you look at Alchemy, best of 3, mono black was 80%. So, that's a great format. Bowmaster and One Ring are definitely not overpowered for a standard environment. But let's digress. Golgari Midrange, 10%. And then we have mono red aggro 6.3 Esper. There's kind of there's 3 Esper decks. There's the Legends, there's the mid-range pile, and there's the control deck. Mid-range pile is not even showing up in a lot. A lot of people aren't currently playing it on the arena ladder, but it's actually a very good deck. And it won both the Pizzabox Open, which we'll take a look at, as well as has a lot of good showings on MTGO. So definitely something to consider. Turns out if you put all the good Esper cards in a deck, the deck wins. We have Bant Control. That was from the Worlds, Azorius Soldiers, another deck that kind of got an innovation from Worlds, and we'll cover it very shortly. And then Sultai Control, which is basically, imagine the Golgari Midrange, but we're like, hey, here's some Fairy Masterminds, as well as some counter spells to just hedge the ramp matchup. Because the ramp matchup tends to be very difficult for the Golgari Midrange deck. I'm less concerned with win rate of today. It's very volatile. Could depend on who's playing, the amount of games, everything like that. We're looking at the actual popularity over time, kind of looking like the Mirror Midrange pre the most recent set was the most dominant deck. We then look at, with the release of Wilds, Golgari Midrange, very popular up to the end of the season. We've seen it drop quite significantly in the 20s last couple weeks, and now down to about 10. That kind of makes sense when you see the correlation of the rise in the domain decks. The domain decks do very well against that. While you do have access to Duress, more Liliana's, post-board, in game 1, you have a very difficult time beating with their deck. You have a lot of cut downs against a deck that's playing Atraxa. We see the fall of mono red kind of coming down from the 12s. Seeing the Legends deck kind of hover around there as well. Just looking at, so the domain decks kind of got an increase in win rate, but it's a very small sample for just 2 days of the new month that I don't really want to base anything on that. So for Mythic rank, we're looking the last week, September 25th through October 2nd. Ladder reset September 30 or 31st. How many days are in September? September 30th. 30. So we're going to jump into it itself. And Azorius Soldiers, 70% win rate, 150 games. So this is Simon Nielsen's. This is a really innovative kind of version of the deck. Now, you'll notice there's no Lord in the effect. So unlike the best of one versions that are very like all-in creature based, like this is my deck, here are my Thalias, we're just going to tax, play to the board. The way Simon described it in Worlds is this is kind of a combo deck. You're looking to spam the board and then kind of hit your Harbin and give your creatures flying and kind of combo kill your opponent. You're playing a lot of interaction in the deck. So you have Make Disappear, in a pseudo way, Zephyr Sentinel's interaction. You think about it, it allows you to, your opponent's going to cast a removal spell while you flash in your Zephyr Sentinel, bounce your creature, kind of reset at that. It's also got some utility with things like the Resolute Reinforcements to get you another token. Luminarch Veteran's going to gain you life in the early game, just kind of grind out your opponent. You have Recruitment Officer in here to get you card advantage. I don't know why Untapped is being silly. Oh, my internet went down. Hello. There we go. There we go. We're in business. Recruitment Officer in here. Get you some card advantage. 2 Yodians. Not like, because you're not as all-in aggressive deck. We got some bunnies in here. Just you're going wide. Well, here's a big beater in some cases. Some decks just can't beat that. Wedding Announcement. Another way to just kind of go wide. 1 Werefox. Notably with the wording on Werefox. It's kind of interesting. We've seen Brutal Cathar. We've seen Skyclave Apparition. Those specifically mention opponent's permanents. The Werefox can allow you to put it on your own. So think in a game where your opponent's about to cast a Sunfall, but you want to keep a threat around. Well, you can Werefox exile one of your threats, and then have it, when this dies, you get your card back. So it's kind of like a pseudo phase out kind of effect that you can use in that sense. Knight of Nevios, very good in a deck that's playing a lot of creatures, like cheap creatures that can convoke it out. Got a lot of utility lands, so even with flooding in a deck, so you normally like 24 lands in an aggressive deck. What do I do if I flood? Well, you got 2 Ottawaras, you got 2 Aganjos, 2 Myrex. Fortified Beachhead is an anthem for your deck as well. Your sideboard, you have access to Elspeth's Smite for the aggressive decks, Destroy Evil for like the ramp decks, very good to hit like any of their enchantments, but also their big threats. This deals with Sheoldred, anything of that nature. Lantern Flare as just cheap removal. You're really never cleaving with this card. You're just casting it as a 2-mana deal X, where X is the number of creatures you control. And notably, this can hit your opponent's planeswalkers. Protecting Negotiators as a very scalable counterspell. That also can be kicked to give you a creature. That's really good against like the big mana decks, stuff like that. Regal Bunnicorn for like the aggressive base decks, mono red, stuff like that. Toskia is welcome against the heavy removal deck. Basically, think of it like this way. You have a Wedding Announcement in a Toskia's. Wedding Announcements makes a creature, then you get something from, you get a card draw from Toskia. Then on your opponent's turn, you can flash in a Resolute Reinforcement and then draw another card. So you get some value there. Wandering Emperor as well for the heavy like removal based matchups or things with heavy sweepers, farewell deck, stuff of that nature. So very interesting deck there. We then move to Esper Legends. And this is the list that won it all. So this one's at 66% win rate. So really the only innovation from this list. A lot of it's been the deck that we've been seeing for upwards of a year now. This Rafine card probably is pretty good along with Sheoldred, but the lists have moved off of some of like the random 2-drops in this slot and just gone to Fairy Mastermind. Mastermind's very good against any other incidental card draw. Good in the mirrors as well. And then it like plays really nice. Like if your opponent has Rafine, then while you're drawing cards too, it can fill your hand to give you more fodder to kind of cycle through. The deck itself opted to go with 1 Make Disappear in the main, just trimming on the number of Ronas, which isn't as good in a field with heavy Sheoldreds kind of mixed into there. The decks itself also have moved off Adeline in favor of Lord Skitter. There's another card that plays really nice with Rafine, lets you go wide, puts counters on things, kind of a army in a box, similar to Adeline, but has incidental graveyard hate, which is really good to just kind of pick off the random cards in your opponent's yards, like Tenacious Underdog, stuff of that nature, anything that may have a chance to come back. Especially in these decks, like these Legends decks, you'll notice like a number of Akanumas and stuff like that. So you kind of eat away at their things that they could potentially hit Akanuma. This deck has 27 lands, but really these are all spells in the late game because you have so many legends. It's very cheap to utilize this. Your sideboard is cut downs for aggro, Surge of Salvation for black or red base removal, Disdainful Stroke, Negate for the big mana decks, Blot Out, target opponent exiles a creature or planeswalker they control with the greatest mana value. So I'm guessing just like bigger mana things, control, stuff of that nature. Wedding Announcement for the grindier matchups, as well as AO itself for the grindier matchups. We then move to 4-color control. So this is Reed Duke's deck from the tournament, 64%. Really with this, it's just a shift from like the Ossification package main to more black. So you'll notice in the mana base 2 plains, 3 swamps. Some of the older lists, like I know I was playing the Ossifications main in Best of 1, and I was on I think 4 or 5 plains in the list with 1 swamp. So kind of a configuration change. The Virtue gives you another like early removal spell, but also late game bomb. It's also an enchantment that you can hit off Atraxa. So just another thing you can hit, similar to like the Leyline Bindings. Courier's Briefcase as early ramp. You got Beans to draw you cards. So any of your bigger spells, you cast a Sunfall, you draw a card. Cast a Leyline Binding, draw a card. A lot of value kind of accrued into there. 2 Myrics in the mana base. Duress for early hand hate. Smites, Anoint with Affliction as cheap removal, but notably exile-based removal. So you get rid of like Mosswood Dread Knight, stuff of that nature. Destroy Evil for like bigger things, enchantments. Disdainful Stroke, Negate package for the big mana decks. Another Beanstalk for the grindier matchups. Chrome Host with against decks that take out some of their removal. You can kind of spam the board wide. Knockout Blow versus aggro decks. Baloth, good versus like aggressive decks, but also reasonable against like Liliana's and stuff like that. We then go to Bant Control. So this was from, I forget his first name, but his last name's Orange, and he plays a lot of control. So this one's at 55% win rate. So this is Bant in the sense that it does play green cards technically, but it plays 2. It plays up the Beanstalk, and then it plays Broker's Charm. So Broker's Charm is basically here to destroy an enchantment or be a 2-mana divination. Technically, target creature you control gets +1. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature, planeswalker, an opponent controls. You can technically use this with your Hornlock Whale or like one of your tokens. So it does have some utility in that sense. But notably, with the up the Beanstalks, you'll notice a number of X-based spells. So March of the Other Woolly Light, Syncopate, and these you can cast like overcast late in the game for more mana than what you actually need. And you get to trigger card draw. So it's just like a recurable card draw engine, where at the very least, it's a 2-mana loot effect that kind of plays into effect there. You'll notice that a number of the decks have been shaving the number of Memory Deluge, while very good into like Shieldreds and stuff like that to provide you card advantage without actually drawing you cards. You'll notice, like I was saying, like a lot of the decks are playing Lord Skitter now. And this is very easy for you to pick off your opponent's Memory Deluge, stuff of that nature. Leyline Bindings in here. You'll notice with the mana base, you got Jetmir's Garden, Rafine's Tower, and Spar's Headquarters. These allow you to have cheaper Leyline Bindings as well. The Bindings also will trigger up the Beanstalk for more card advantage. You're winning this with this deck with either Emperors, Sunfalls, Hornlock Whales, or a copy of Myrics in mana base. Your sideboard's basically just going to be a configuration of removal, counters, and then Chrome Host Seed Shark. Once your opponent tends to take out their removal, you bring in those threats. Eternal Wander for kind of the go wide strategies, makes you tokens, and then for heavy control, like counter-based decks, you could bring in your Hullbreaker Horrors as well. Your opponent's bringing in Disdainful Strokes, well now you have an uncounterable Lobster Shrimp Cocktail. So this is Golgari Midrange. So this is Anthony Lee's list from the top 8. Or top 8 maybe? Yeah, I think he got top 8. Played in Worlds. He did beat Reed Duke, so yeah, I think he was in there. So cut downs, duresses, just a whole bunch of removal. The big kind of card engine of the deck is Mosswood Dread Knight, just drawing you cards, coming into play. Your opponent generally doesn't want to kill it. Like I was watching a match when he was playing Reed Duke, and then Reed multiple occasions had Archangel of Wrath double kick and opted to go to the face as opposed to hitting the Dread Knight just to prevent Anthony from getting that additional card draw. This is another card where if you can pick it off, so you'll see like afflict with affliction. That's not anoint with affliction. Being exile based removal, playing very well to get rid of these Dread Knights, getting rid of the tenacious underdogs, just getting rid of these cards that keep coming back from the graveyard. Blissa really showcasing the power of in here. notably against the ramp decks, blows up enchantments, so blows up leyline mining, stuff of that nature. You got underdogs, but like speaking of like in the main board against the ramp matchup, like go ahead downs don't do much. Terra Sunder's not bad, but you have like Gix Command, which is medium in the deck. The Virtues don't do much against the ramp deck. And then post board you kind of go. This is similar to best of one. The Tortoise plays really nice here, where it lets you mill into your creature lands, reduce the cost of activating them, while also giving them a power boost. Post board, you have like Planeswalker package, you have Nissa, you have Ashiok for card advantage, Gix Command. Rankle's Prank was really effective in those games. To sacrifice 2 creatures. Oftentimes the ramp deck is only going to present 1 or 2 creatures. While very impactful creatures, this lets you, force them to sack. You got Baloth for life gain, or in the mirrors with the Lilianas, Arena to kind of grind you value, Path to Peril to deal with early aggression, and then like a number of different types of removal spells and Duress as additional hand aid. Moving from there, we have the standard challenge. So this is the top 32. It was won by that same kind of Soldiers S deck, slightly different configuration. This version's on 3 Werefox kind of mixed into there. Still has a Luminarch Veteran, still the Resolute Reinforcement, only a single copy of Yodian here, kind of mixed into there. You have your Wedding Announcements, 4 Make Disappears, 1 Protect the Negotiator's Bane, so slightly different configuration. But we also have like Virtue of Loyalty in the side, just another flash threat, some Lantern Flares, March. So just little tweaks here and there around, but there's a couple copies of Mono Red that showed up here, a couple different configurations. So like a 3 Godric version in here, 1 Witchstalker main, 4 Nahiri's Warcrafting, just really respecting Shieldred kind of coming into here. A very clean sideboard. You got your Furnace Punishers, Koths, Invasions, and Lithomantic. Lithomantic with all the Esper Legends and midrange going around, very, very useful. Just cleanly answering your opponent's Rafine kind of answered in that. So this is the Esper midrange deck. So you'll notice elements of the Legends deck. So your Denix, your Fiends, Shieldred, Skitters, but you have Wedding Announcements in here. So you're kind of going more wide token-wise. Virtue of Loyalty, another thing that gets you more tokens at instant speed, but then also just kind of super juices up your deck when you play it. Just puts counters on everything. You have Wandering Emperor's main, and then just more interaction main. So go for the throats, make disappears, destroy evils. A lot of this is you're not as just all out dead to like a sweeper at times, where you could potentially be with the Legends deck. So just allows you to play more useful cards because you're not on Thalias, 4 Disdainful Strokes, some Kaidos, a lot of kind of utility mixed into the deck itself. Another version of Mono Red. So something that I'm wrapping my head around because I'm trying to figure out what configuration I want to play in the Pizzabox like grand finale tournament. I don't understand the Thundering Raijus in the side. Like, there's better cards, I think, to play. It kind of forces you into being more all-in into the board. It doesn't skip, like, you're not attacking into Shieldreds with it. In the Soldiers matchup, maybe, because they're not bringing that much removal, but I just don't see why you would want Raijus on the side. Like, I think the Planeswalker package is better against heavy removal. Like, this isn't great into ramp either, because you're just playing further into Sunfall, so you have thoughts on this, let me know, because this was the one that was like scratching my head around that I couldn't figure it out. This was another list that was like pretty sweet that I wanted to show. So 6th place, it is a Dimir control deck. So we see the return of Lier, just casting stuff from your graveyard, 4 of Hadishin. So it's kind of the mono blue, but with actual like good cards mixed in. Shieldreds, Hallions in this deck. So you have Virtues, Kaidos, some Gix Command. You still have your Counterspell package for the big mana decks. Flow of Knowledge in here for card advantage. You're playing a number of Rafine's Tower and Xander's Lounge that also count as the islands that you can discard to Flow of... they trigger the additional draw of Flow of Knowledge. You have Go for the Throats in there. So just kind of a Dimir control deck. Some Leers, Suspicious Stowaway. Just for like card looting, which is an interesting one. I would think that instead of Stowaway, you would probably want Fairy Mastermind. That seems like the notable card missing from this list. Just another kind of flash threat and effect, kind of mixed into there. like what I mentioned in the best of one video was these decks, when you're always just holding up permission, it's nice to have a way to kind of break that parity, because like you want to use your mana every turn. So if you're just always holding up counter spells and not necessarily progressing, like you do have some options in this deck with like Thirst for Discovery, Impulse, Flow of Knowledge kind of mixed into there. But having like an actual threat that you could sneak in at instant speed is also like has some value in that sense. And the Fairy Mastermind is very strong in that respect. So you can take a look here. I'll paste the list itself. The last thing I want to mention was from the Pizzabox Open we had yesterday. So there's 105 participants in here. It was won by the Esper Midrange deck. The Azorius Aggro deck went to the finals, was unbeaten in the Swiss, only lost in the finals. This is card for card, pretty much what we just saw. Actually, this is the list that we saw from MTGO. So with the Werefoxes kind of mixed into there, went 7-0 here. The one other deck I wanted to mention is this Boros Convoke deck that's been kind of popping up here and there. The mana base, I think, is awful in this deck. Boros mana is so bad right now in Standard. Like here, it's really just Battlefield Forge, and then you're really relying on basics. It's playing 4 Myrex in a deck that has a number of colored 1-drops, which makes it very punishing. So I lost more games playing with this to the mana than anything else. Boros is very popular in Pioneer, but the mana is really good. You have your fast line, stuff like that. You're missing that here. But it is a kind of Convoke style, go wide kind of the Swarm deck. So you have like Epiture as well as Yodian Frontliner. Both of these with Gleeful Demolition can turn on turn 2, make a bunch of tokens. You have Raging Battle Mouse that lets you kind of multi-spell in a turn. Knight Aaron of Eos to give you some card advantage. Bunnycorn gets very large in this deck because you could go so wide. But you're playing Draft All-Star, Pack 1, Pick 1, Mythic Uncommon, Emodane's Recruiter. So this is seeing play all the way up to Pioneer right now. So for 5 mana, you can make 2/2/2s, but for the most part, you're playing this. You kind of go wide with the board, and then you play 3 mana. Plays really nice with the Battle Mouse because you can double spell on turn 4, or potentially even turn 3. You play a 1-drop and then play this. You could go pretty wide, and then this gives all your creatures +1/0 in haste. So if you have a wide board, overrun your board. All those creatures that came in could kind of smash in. Invasions for Hand Hate, Witch Stalker Frenzies kind of mixed into there. So that's kind of the deck I wanted to show from the tournament that was kind of missed out, that's come up this week. But you can take a look. There's a number of decks. We're looking at like popularity. Esper Midrange was the most popular deck, 55%. Domain Ramp, 55% win rate. Golgari Midrange, 57%. Control, some sort of ramp. Mono Red had a really bad showing. The Azorius Soldiers, 5 decks. 1 did really well. Bant Control didn't do too hot, but depends on the matchup. This is a smaller sample size, but things to consider, all things in there. So, gonna wrap this one up. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.